Order this special meeting of the Pacific Grove Unified School District Board of Education on January 22nd, 2026. I'll read our landage. Actually, before we get started, we have a trustee participating remotely. Under AB 2449, trustees may participate remotely without agendizing their private location if the quorum of the board is physically present at our primary location, which we are at this time. And I'm going to read the script to initiate the process so that you can participate remotely today, Trustee Wax. Trustee Wax is joining us remotely today under the provisions of AB 2449. Trustee Wax, please state for the record if you are participating under the just cause provision or due to emergency circumstances. Please also provide a brief general description of your circumstances, not exceeding 20 words, without disclosing any confidential medical information. Did you capture all of that?
Yeah. I don't want to use up my 20 words. I am very sneezy and gross. And I just don't want to infect you all if I'm sick. My daughter was sick.
Thank you. 15 words. Well done. Hope you feel better. Trustee Wax, please disclose whether any individuals 18 years of age or older are present in the room at your remote location and state the nature of your relationship with them.
In the room or the location? Sorry.
It says present in the room at your remote location.
Oh, no.
Okay. The next thing is, board, may I have a motion to approve Trustee Wax remote participation due to these emergency circumstances?
Also move. Second.
Motion made by Trustee Hazen, seconded by Clerk Shamas. We'll all do a roll call vote because we now will be having a trustee participate remotely. Roll call, please, Dr. Adamson.
President McNary. Aye. Clerk Shamas.
Aye.
Trustee Dr. Hazen.
Aye.
And Trustee Wax.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Motion carries. And trustee, as a result, we'll be doing all votes via roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call, but we won't have any this evening because we don't have action items.
Well, other than roll
approving the agenda. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Trustee Wax, I have to conclude by confirming that you are using both audio and visual technology and that the camera should remain on for the remainder of the meeting. If there's a technical disruption, we on our end have to pause the meeting to restore the statutory rights of the public to access the meeting. Okay. Just a note. And with that, I will move on to our land acknowledgement this evening. Good evening. As we begin this meeting, it's important to pay respect to and acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Ohlone, Costanoan, and Esselen people, and additionally pay respect to elders, both past and present. Roll call, please, Dr. Adamson.
President McNary.
Here.
Clerk Shamas.
Here.
Trustee Dr. Hazen.
Here.
And Trustee Wax.
Here I am.
We have 3 trustees in person, creating a quorum, and one. Just to note for the record that Trustee Otmar is not able to join us this evening. We will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Adamson, are there any changes to the agenda as presented?
There are no changes.
Okay. We'll go out to public comment on the adoption of the agenda this evening. No. Okay. Board, any discussion on this item? If not, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept.
I just have one question about at the end of this meeting. Did you want to talk a little bit about putting the facilities 2 by 2 together, you know, like the you emailed us about setting up these meetings and, I don't know, I just thought, but we don't have it listed on the agenda, so you don't have anything that says future. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's normally not on our special agendas. Um,
It just came to my mind.
yeah, yeah.
We'll probably schedule those offline.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then as far as scheduling, we can have contact with one another under the Brown Act for the purposes of calendaring and then that type of thing. Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding the adoption of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay, motion made by Dr. Hazen to adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Clerk Shamas. Roll call vote, please.
President Neely,
Aye.
Clerk Shamas,
Aye.
trustee Dr. Hazen,
Yes.
and trustee Wax.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. The last item before we adjourn the closed session is to identify the topics we will be discussing. Item A is negotiations, collective bargaining session, planning and prep with the PGTA for 2025-2026. Item B is negotiations, collective bargaining session, planning and prep with the CSEA for 2025 and 26. Item C is public employee discipline, dismissal, release, leave complaint under Government Code Section 54957. Are there any public comments on these closed session agenda topics? Okay, seeing none in the room and none online, we will adjourn to closed session and be back at 6:30. Okay, it is 6:30 and we are reconvening in open session. Welcome to everyone who's joined us. I'm gonna first give a report out on the actions taken in closed session. With regard to item A, negotiations, planning and preparation with PGTA for 2025-2026, information was received. With regard to item B, negotiations, planning and prep with the CSEA for 2025-2026, information was received. For item C, public employee discipline, dismissal, release, leave, complaint, Government Code Section 54957, Subdivision B, information was received. And with that, Trustee Hazen, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening? Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for all.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We only have one item on our agenda this evening. Oh, and before that, just to note for the record, Trustee Wax is joining us remotely. He's not feeling well, and Trustee Otmar is not able to be here with us this evening. Our only agenda item is going to be our 2026-27 budget study session. And I believe for this item, we are going to shift over to the small tables to do the study session process. And just as a reminder, or to let those of who might be listening know, this is an open board meeting, doing board business in public. We can take public comment on the item, but we can't respond to it. So the way we're going to format it this evening is there will be a presentation from staff. We will then take public comments and questions on the presentation from staff, and then the board will discuss the item. It is an information item only. Recommendations can be made. No action will be taken. So with that, we will just take a moment to shift to the small table. Okay, for this item, I'm not sure who's presenting first, but I will turn it over to staff. Assistant Superintendent Jorn.
Thank you, President McNary, and trustees and public who are with us tonight. Lewis is getting the presentation queued up. And so long as everyone can see it online, we'll go ahead and get started. So tonight we are bringing forward a budget study session for consideration and discussion by the board. On the first slide here, you can see some of the items that we will be discussing: budget reductions, including one-time reductions of around 1.3 million, ongoing budget reductions of 1,056,740, and then some new anticipated expenditures in the 26-27 year that will also be considered. The structure for tonight's meeting, I'll go through this so everybody understands kind of how we're tracking. We are going to review let me just pull it up here. We're going to review the multi-year budget projections, which will include an interim reporting first interim, that will be included in interim reporting second interim, which closes January 31st this month. And the interim reporting will be reported out by staff in March, but we plan to cover the multi-year projections that were included in prior year reporting. Any changes? Travel and conference review. The clear here, this entire budget study session was predicated on a budget subcommittee that was developed by the board last year. We had 3 budget subcommittee meetings, and through the process, there was a variety of information that was brought forward by staff at the request of the budget subcommittee. One of those items was travel and conference review. Full and complete analysis of travel and conference attendance, and of course, focusing on cost-effective solutions to mitigate the travel and conference within the district. Also recommended by the budget subcommittee was a review of position control and FTE. You're going to hear me say that a lot tonight. FTE stands for full-time equivalent analysis. So the review of all full-time and part-time assignments with enrollment data, we'll be covering that tonight. Covering recommended reductions to staff, program, and operational costs for the 26-27 year, with the full intent of bringing forward a balanced budget with educational equity and mitigating budgetary constraints in our outlook or in our multi-year projections. We'll be covering new ongoing expenditures. And to be clear, those new ongoing expenditures that we're presenting tonight are at this place in time. There may be new expenditures that we have to discuss as we move through the budget development process, which follows the budget study session. I'll show an updated multi-year projection, and that updated multi-year projection will include the recommendations tonight, if they were fully implemented, what that would like for the district in the out year and subsequent year, and then a budget process timeline. So here's a snapshot of our multi-year projections for Fund 01. Fund 01 combined, that's our general fund, combined restricted and unrestricted programs. Just a quick note at the top, the state requires a 3% reserve for economic uncertainty. And to note that this district has been in a structural deficit spending mode for the past 6 years with no leveling of reserves. I will note that if we continue down this path with a low single-digit reserve, by the 4th subsequent year, the district may fall below the statutory requirement of the 3% reserve. Before I get into multi-year projections, I'll just give a quick summary of what that looks like for a district. So in the law, the school districts in the state of California are required to maintain a minimum 3% reserve. For the local control funding formula districts, you tend to see a 3% to 5% reserve. For basic aid districts, you tend to see around a 17% to 21% reserve. Just to put it into context, if a district falls below a 3% reserve, the district falls into what's known as receivership, or AB 1200, which is initiated through state legislation back in the 90s. And the fiscal crisis assistance management team comes into the school district and effectively takes over the fiscal control of the school district, making all decisions with the state appointed trustee for the school district. They effectively remove the ability to collectively bargain, look at all of salary schedules. They effectively take all revenue that is proposed by the district and they balance expenditures to revenue, which is the worst case scenario, but I think it's important to note, and that's why a 3% reserve or maintaining above that is very, very important. And that's why we're discussing the statutory deficit spending this district's been having for some time now tonight. You'll see here in the first column, that's a metric. I'll bring you to the slide The metrics are our beginning balance, the revenue, expense, a deficit or surplus, ending fund balance, and our reserve levels. In the second column, you'll see the 26-27 projection for our district. This does include a 2% increase to salary schedule and a 5% increase to health and welfare, which is for all units in the district. The end balance projected is combined. That's restricted and unrestricted. You can see we'll be starting in 26-27 with just over a $51.7 million beginning balance, revenue of 49.7, expenditures of around 51.5. You'll see how the deficit breaks down just below there of 1.7 million. That's a projected deficit of 978,654 on the unrestricted side and 722,719 on the restricted side. Leaving the district with an ending fund balance of just over 3.1 million and a reserve level of 5.6. Before I mention the next year, which we're going to look at, which is in the multi-year projection in 27-28, to put it into context, the ending fund balance of 3.1 million isn't enough to sustain the district's 1 month worth of liabilities, which is salary and accounts payable payments for the district. Those range between around 3.6 and 4.2 million, depending on our accounts payable. Looking at 27-28 projections, at the top, you'll note that there is only step and column included in this projection. We've also included things like escalators, such as the consumer pricing index, increase to cost of goods and services, as well as increase of utilities, but no negotiated settlement on the salary schedule, no increase to health and welfare is in that projection. Because we did settle with our bargaining units last year on a 3-year deal, which did not include 27-28. So we'll be starting out the year with 3.1 million. You can see here revenue projections at just around 51.4 million, 51.5. Expenditures at just around 51.8. You can see a projected deficit here of 695,697, primarily made up by the unrestricted deficit, with very minimal deficit on the restricted side, 10,955. And essentially why the restricted deficit is going down is restricted revenue is tied to restricted expenditures, and the district has an obligation to spend those restricted dollars, and they have a timeline to spend those restricted dollars. So what you're going to see is the restricted side of the deficit is high in the years that we still have revenue received, and it's low in the years where that revenue is expiring. You'll see here a projected ending fund balance of 2,464,243 with a projected district reserve of 4.6%. And I'll pause there and look into the board if there's any comments or questions.
Just noting, we will save public comment for the end of the presentation, but board members, any questions at this pause?
Did I hear you say that the increase to health and welfare was 5%?
I'm sorry, 0.5%.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize.
Go ahead.
All right, so one of the first items that the subcommittee asked us to look at was the travel and conference for the district to provide a full expenditure analysis, looking at administrative conferences, professional development seminars, curriculum adoption reviews, mandatory compliance training. And then again, one thing to note when I talk about restricted and unrestricted, a lot of our restricted revenue does have tied to it the component of professional development. So we have to spend some of those dollars on professional development, whereby on the unrestricted side, that's not necessarily the case. So we really wanted to look at this in a way that parsed out unrestricted travel and conference, which is something we'd really like to limit or reduce, and the restricted side. And what you'll see from the comparative data, let's go ahead, Lewis, if you could open up the 2-year comparative data. Put it up on my computer so I can read it. So what you see here on the top is the unrestricted. Next down below is the restricted. You're looking at a side-by-side comparison of fiscal years. So starting with 23-24 actuals, moving to budget, then actuals adopted, and then a revised budget. So last year when we brought budget reductions forward, it was the direction from the board to staff to make a 20% reduction over budget to our travel and conference on both the unrestricted and the restricted side. You can see here, if you scroll to the top, you can see here if we're looking at the revised budget of 24-25, it's column D. That's 74,338. And the unrestricted side, that the revised budget during 25-26, which is column G, you can see around a $20,000 reduction. At the adopted budget, which is column F, you can see that we adopted a budget with a lower adopted budget, but there were some increases of travel and conference, and you can see how it breaks down by site allocation, tech, professional development, board, superintendent's office, business, human resources, Avid, and so forth. And I'll get into the way this breaks down by units in just a second. So that's on the unrestricted side. You can see that the district did made the effort to make a sizable reduction on the unrestricted side. If you scroll down, Lewis. On the restricted side, we also attempt to make a reduction there. But again, as I mentioned, restricted programs and restricted dollars require us to spend money in a certain manner. So any one of these categorical programs on the left-hand column, starting with special ed IDEA, all the way down to small reimbursement, there are some requirements for travel and conference expenditures tied to that revenue source. But again, you'll note, looking at column D compared to G, there was a reduction of around 18,000 from 82,970 to 66,457. Total Fund 01, again, if you'll move down column B and column G, you'll see that 157,000 was budgeted in the out year. This year's budget's 121,705. So the district did its due diligence to make that 20% reduction as recommended by the board. And when we get into this further discussion tonight, we're continuing to make those reductions in the out year. I will note that, $20,000 or $30,000 reduction doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but every bit helps. And that's why we focused in on this. And that was one of the commitments of the subcommittee. Let's close that out, Lewis, and go back to the. Okay, so let's take a look at travel and conference by unit. It's kind of a big document, but let's just scroll to the bottom, Lewis, and I'll give you a summary. So here's how it breaks down by unit, restricted and unrestricted. Let's just bring you to lines 85 and 86 at the bottom, and then I'll talk about the table at the top. Really, it's balanced, as you can see. So on the restricted side, around 27,000, and on the general funds, or the unrestricted side, around 28,000. You can see on the top, we have site class, the sites taking the travel and conference, and then by unit, classified, certificated, confidential, management, and other, which is board. That are associated with these requests to attend. Again, the total 55,694 is broken down around 50% to unrestricted and 50% to restricted. And then looking at line 83, you can see how that breaks down by unit. So $7,800 for classified, around 21,600 are certificated, 5,009 to confidential, 11,599 for management, and then 8,739 for other, which is the board. So I think that the takeaway from this analysis, as discussed at the subcommittee, was the district did a pretty good job at making reductions that were recommended from the board last year. And I'm not going to go into the detail above. If you scroll up the way that we have them designated, so anything in green is restricted. It's not hitting the general fund. It's tied specifically to programmatic need. Anything in white also is tied to programmatic need, but it's funded on the unrestricted side through the general fund. The subcommittee really did go line item by line item and parse this out, and there wasn't anything that jumped out as something that could be reduced. Everything here is to support the needs of our student population through the professional development of our staff. So ultimately, that was the takeaway from the subcommittee. Let's close that out, Lewis, and go back to the presentation. Yes, oh yeah, absolutely.
And you said that the other was entirely fed.
Sorry.
At the very bottom, sorry, line. Right there in gray.
Oh yes, yeah, there was, I apologize. Special ed and board are lumped into other. So board of trustees at the top, the 6,641, and then special ed. Thank you for pointing that out. Yep, apologize. Okay, so before we move on, seeing them. All right. Let's take a look at the next slide. So next up, we took a look at our position control and enrollment alignment. The district's position control analysis focused on three critical areas. We've been talking about this for some time now. Enrollment-based alignment, so matching our staff levels to our enrollment and our projected enrollment. Second, taking a look at funding source transition. And what that means essentially is if we have a funding source that we receive, whether it's restricted or unrestricted, what was the purpose of those dollars? And if the purpose of those dollars was to fund positions, If they were a restricted position, were those positions expired or were those positions absorbed into the general fund? Which when I get into further detail, you'll see that oftentimes in this district, there was revenue generated through one-time funds where positions were assigned to those one-time funds, and when the one-time funds expired, the district rolled those positions into the general fund, increasing the deficit on the unrestricted side. And then contractual compliance, ensuring that all of our staffing decisions comply with our collective bargaining agreements, and in particular, as it relates to enrollment, our class size ratios is defined in the PGTA agreement. So this comes right out of our collective bargaining agreement with Pacific Coast Teachers Association. You can see here we have goal ratios and maximum ratios at the elementary level. That's up in the top. You'll see transitional kindergarten is 1:24 student teacher ratio. Kindergartens through grades 2 is a 25:1 student ratio. And then grades 3 through 5 is a 28:1 ratio. And that's goal. We have in the contract maximum ratios for elementary schools. For TK, it's 1:24, it's statutory, 1:12 adult to student ratio, and it's 1:10 adult to student ratio if there are early enrollment students in those classes. So that lowers the ratio. You'll see on the maximum ratios there, K through 2, 27:1, maximum student to teacher ratio, and grades 3 through 5, 29:1, maximum student to teacher ratio. Now you'll see our secondary school requirements for middle school, base ratio of 1:26. And high school is 1:28. Now there is room within the contract for those ratios to be exceeded. You might see that at the middle and high school levels. But I will be clear that when we're building our class sizes, we're building our staffing to enrollment projections in the fall, every fall, we build those to goal. We never build those to max. And in fact, historically, this district hasn't hit maximum ratios. It did in, I believe, one class in our entire district this year. And I apologize if I'm misspeaking, but I believe it was one class. But again, and the consensus with building out our staffing to enrollment ratios is building to goal. So when I presented the enrollment projections at our last board meeting last week, we presented these items and we show that our projections note that all classrooms in our district will have a class size ratio less than goal. Some of those class sizes are far less than goal, and some of those are close to goal, but none of them are built to maximum ratios. And I'll pause. All right, next up, we continued our assessment of our position control. This was our full-time equivalent to enrollment analysis. We wanted to be sure that, site by site, all the staffing allocations were met, not just for in the classrooms, but with our classified staff, with all of our other support staff, aside from our teachers, to meet the needs of our student population. We took a look at all 5 of our school sites. We looked at all 262.4 FTE in our district. And then just a note there that there is a 4% enrollment variance that we've been experiencing, and that is basically enrollment to ADA, average daily attendance. So you do see a variance there. We have 1,717 students that are projected to be enrolled in the fall. But as we progress through CBED's check-ins with the state, that enrollment does ebb and flow. For example, we just received our CBED's numbers last month and we were down to 1,699. Yet we had 1,717 students enrolled. So that's the variance. We do have a full data report that our wonderful fiscal officer put together for us, Carly Adams. If you could click on that for me, Lewis. We'll start out by having Carly kind of walk us through the top section, which identifies assignments, site, CBED's enrollment, and the FTE associated with those. Carly?
So this spreadsheet here is something new that's been established. It's our FTE analysis. It's broken out by each job category. You can see here in column B, we have our current CBED's enrollment broken out by site. And then we have our teachers, our nurses, our mental health, all the way across the board, and then the different funding sources. So this is something that we're going to utilize moving forward. It helps us identify funding that's going to be running out. For example, we have our Arts and Music Discretionary Block Grant, which is currently funding positions. That'll expire at the end of this year, and so forth. So this is kind of our guide now, our tool, to make sure that we're aligning our staffing to enrollment.
Thanks, Carly. You can see on line 15 there, you'll see COF, that's change in funding impacts. Carly just kind of alluded to that. So that's kind of how we're tracking what has happened with funding source alignment to position over the years. So in column D, you'll see COF 1.0 FTE. So that's a change of funding that occurred for one FTE for our intervention teacher, which was previously funded under resource 7435 and was shifted to 0000. What do those numbers mean? 0000 is unrestricted general fund. 7435 was a restricted revenue source that was specifically designed to support intervention of students, primarily as a result of COVID. So ESSER dollars. There was quite a few resources available at the time. I'm not going to go through and list them, but you're going to see as we kind of pan through line item 15, the change of funding that was initiated to maintain staffing when we were losing revenue to pay for that staffing. And then the end result, of course, is 16. But let's walk through each item. I think it's important to note. So scroll to the right there, Lewis. The next over, you'll see change of funding to 6770 and 2627. So what you're not seeing there is those zeros, the 0000, right? So there is another resource available for the district to move that position to that doesn't impact the general fund. So below it, you'll see that there's $0 associated with that, right? 6770 is our music arts program categorical funding funded through the state of California to support music arts, VAPA. And we believe that to be an ongoing funding source as of right now. It's been in the governor's budget. The legislature has approved that as an ongoing resource. So, but again, for us to track it, that's why we have some of this information here. It's not for the presentation tonight. It's so that we know that we need to do a change of funding form, which initiates a process for the 26-27 year for that FTE. And above, you'll see it's 0.4 FTE. Scroll to the right. Next up, you'll see in 24-25, we had 2 FTE for mental health therapists. They were previously funded out of ESSER. ESSER was the COVID relief dollars. There was a change in funding in 24-25 to shift that to resource 6500. That's special education. And just to note with 6500, you're not seeing the 0000, but that is effectively unrestricted because special education funding comes from a general fund unrestricted contribution to support it. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, we have around $1.3 million in revenue that comes in to support an $8 million program. The gap there is the general fund needs to pick that up. So it's around what, 7 million, 7.1. But you can see, so 321,000 once funded through ESSER dollars to maintain program for our district was a $321,000 impact to the general fund. Next up, a need for change of funding for 26-27. Again, just a note for us. You can see no impact below. To the right there, you'll see change of funding from ELOG. That was an older categorical program to unrestricted 1.0. And what this was an increase of half an FTE to each one of the elementary school counselors. So previously funded under ELOG, shifted to the general fund, $150,000 impact to the general fund. Scroll to the right, Lewis. There we go. Okay, this is, so now we're on to instructional assistants. You'll see there in column AI, change of funding of 8 instructional assistants. All of those IAs had their FTE increased, 8 of them by 0.2 FTE for a total of 1.6 FTE. And it was all shifted to the general fund, previously funded out through COVID dollars and ESSER. I'll note that related to this item, initially, I wasn't with the district, but initially the intent was to have a TOSA at the elementary schools, and through the budget development process and through site discussion, they believed that there was a need to increase the FTE for instructional assistants and not assign a TOSA to the elementary schools. So the district has maintained that increased FTE to 8 positions that was previously funded through the ESSER dollars. And again, you can see below 86,464. Okay, next up we have, can you scroll up so I can see what that is, Lewis? Sorry, AK. Okay, so we have an expiring, that's on universal pre-K. We have an expiring resource there for 26-27 of 20,285. You'll see you'll see 0 there below because it didn't impact us in 25-26, but it will impact us in 26-27 if we do decide to maintain that FTE. And at this point in time, the board's going to discuss this, but the recommendation from staff is to maintain that FTE to support our TK population. But again, the 20,792 is an impact to the unrestricted general fund. previously funded through the UPK grant. And again, just some more data for the district to look at. This is a big one, AU. So there was a change of funding by the district to move all 4 of the site techs into Measure A. Fund 21. This is Fund 21 supports our tech. That was our tech bond. Measure A is our tech bond. It's housed in Fund 21. We did this to mitigate the unrestricted general fund impact, meaning that the district had been structurally spending for some time, and the district made the concerted effort to shift those positions into a restricted resource, effectively Fund 21 Measure A, because the bond language would allow us to do it, thereby relieving the general fund of the $347,470 obligation. Now, we have it on here because we need to track this, because Measure A is only for a certain amount of time. We do series releases on Measure A, and we need to plan for that to shift back to the general fund at some point. And then you can see the final one, there's a change of funding back to Fund 12. That's a note for Carly and I. Don't really need to discuss that. It's kind of an inter-fund shift, but there's no impact. You can see there's a 0 below. So let me bring you over to column A and B really quick, line items 16 and 17, just to point out. So the cumulative effect of change of funding from restricted programs to unrestricted in our current year in 25-26 is $725,740. So those are expenditures that we have that were once funded through one-time resources of the general fund is now picked up. You could draw a distinction that it's tied to our deficit. In the 26-27 year, that is line 17. You'll see the increase, right? So moving from 725, 740 to 746, 532, and then in perpetuity with step and column and so forth, there will be an increase every single year. I'll pause right there before I move on. Yeah.
Apologize for anyone that couldn't hear me earlier. The first item, the cost incurred, that does not imply that this transition is happening in this year, right? The decision to move to the general fund could have happened years ago, but it's just
Right.
okay. So this is ongoing, just general fund.
Yes.
Okay, that's important for me to understand. So thank you. The other, you brought up a little bit with the step and column, but just thinking other increases, whether it's, if you hire someone who has more experience when someone retired, et cetera. Is that also an area we're able to track to see? Because I assume the goal is that revenue will increase to keep up with those regular operating costs. But I guess one of my concerns is if we had a year where we happen to hire a bunch of people that were more expensive because of their experience, that's also going to contribute to a deficit that we probably want to keep track of as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely, that's a great point. We are keeping track of that. I would suggest that a few years ago, the district adopted the Supplemental Employee Retirement Program, SERP, right? And the intent of the SERP was effectively to do what you just mentioned, which is offer an incentive for folks to retire. For those employees that retire, they received like a 5-year annuity, right? Which help support them in retirement to pay for things like medical benefits and so forth. With the intent that the rehiring would be at a lower step and column. Also with the intent that some of those positions, those assignments that retired may have been ripped or a reduction in force based on the lack of need or staffing to enrollment. What I would say related to your question is the rehiring of staff at a lower step and column more or less did not occur. Right. The district for certificated staff grants 11, and there's then folks are brought in on step 12. There's other things associated with that as it relates to longevity, above your base pay. And then similarly on the classified side, I would just suggest that the district has a generous salary schedule. And we also have, let's be honest, we have a really great population of students and teachers that exist in our district already, and staff for that matter. So it's an attractive place to work. So we tend to attract our more more seasoned teachers and our more seasoned classified staff, which there's a cost associated with it. So the end result was that no, it did not result. The RIF didn't help us in a reduction in filling positions. Also related to the RIF, filling or reduction in force for positions we felt that may not need to be refilled also did not result in the savings we anticipated, simply because of the shift in our population or demographic of our population. So there may have been an intent to reduce a class size at one of our lower grade levels, and then our projections were off, and we had more students at the time. We had more students at pre-registration and registration that we had anticipated, so we had to rescind the layoff, and we had to staff accordingly. So,
Right.
does that answer your question?
So, then I guess what you're saying is like, to me, like that's the background tide.
Yeah.
These are the things that are always changing that we know are changing, but we need to be able to track that as well, because, fundamentally, if those are increasing faster than our revenue streams, that's just another opportunity for us to say we need to be more aggressive than we would like to be. And that's what it feels like. But in your explanation gives us that background that is actually what we're experiencing as well. So thanks.
Yeah, and I'll just because you brought up revenue, I'll just note that the district did have a couple of anomalies in revenue, which were pretty much as a result of deferred tax revenue receipts for commercial properties during COVID, which was like we had a balloon year in revenue. Ultimately, this district sees an average of around 5%. It's been less than 5%. It's been more than 5%, but let's just call it an average of 5% year over revenue. And by that, I mean property tax revenue, because we're not LCFF driven, is about 5% more than it was last year. We haven't seen any sort of a balloon at all since coming out of COVID. We had around an 8.5% year, and then we've settled back into the 5%. I can tell you this, myself and the CBO for Carmel are in constant communication with the county and looking at projections related to revenue, because it's really tax collection that we're looking at. And they have been very consistent in their projections, which is projecting, we feel like it's been conservative at 5%, but it has fallen around 5%. I mean, last year at actuals, we were, I want to say 5.15%, just over 5%. And prior, that was at actuals. Mid-year, we were tracking around 4.9%. Similarly, this year, we're tracking a little bit under. It's also really tough on the cash flow side for a district like this because, we don't receive regular revenue every single month like an LCFF district. They get an apportionment. They get their revenue every month, like clockwork. We don't. We see our revenue coming in chunks. So I think it's important for the public. And of course, I know the board's aware of this, but it really comes in chunks. We see a big property tax receipt chunk in December, again in April, and then we kind of trickle in between. That's why the district uses a TRAN, which is a tax revenue anticipation note, basically bridge funding our revenue. And there is times, which we saw last year, where there was pretty significant lag in the property tax revenue, even at December's tax receipts, right? It was millions lower than we anticipated. Now, in January and February, it caught up, right? But think of it this way, when the last time the district received a sizable chunk of revenue was April, and you're operating from April to January without any revenue or trickling revenue, and I'm talking tens of thousands, not millions, it's tough for a district to sustain,
Right. So one other just on the big, thank you for the explanation, Assistant Superintendent. And the other part there on the big side too, looking at this table, right, there's a lot of red in restricted funds. So the other problem is that we're not getting access to restricted funds as we have in the past, that we've been able to cover, some of our, not our shortfalls, but some of our ability to hang on to things. And that's been something that I've noticed on the board, that we just don't have access to those grants that we did in the past, whether it's COVID funds or other grants that we were hopeful we would have more access to, frankly.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I want to say 2 budget adoptions ago, I brought forward the fact that the district on the federal side had around a $2.6 million, I called it a light switch, just went off, right? That's why ultimately, forward planning, and not 2-year, multi-year projection, subsequent planning, but forward planning to plan for the drop off in revenue is crucial. And I don't know if the forward planning was as well thought out as it needed to be at the time, meaning that if you have restricted dollars in the realm of a couple of $1 million tied to positions, what's the district's plan for either phasing out the positions, reducing program, sourcing new revenue, right, to backfill that loss in revenue? And I can tell you that's what we are doing right now. We have been doing for the past, few years. But it's very important that we really look at expiring revenues and develop a plan that is a phased-in approach and not an all at once approach. And Unfortunately, we're kind of saddled with having this discussion right now. I know we had this discussion similarly last year, but it is an ongoing problem. Categorical program revenue is drying up. There are new programs that exist the district will receive funding for. There's a couple of new ones on the horizon for us, but they're very targeted in how you can use those dollars. And ultimately, you're not using them to staff people. It's to bolster program, right? So, yeah. Anything you wanted to add, Carly? Okay.
Trustee Wax?
Sorry. Yes.
Would you like to ask any questions or add anything? I almost forgot you were there.
No. I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wanted to check in, and please feel free to unmute if you do. Feel free to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, President McNary. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the recommendations that came out of our subcommittee. The subcommittee was made up by CSEA, PGTA administration, as well as administration to consider budget reductions for 26-27. Really looking at how we can not balance the budget next year, but how in a multi-year position, this district can get itself out of deficit spending, which, to be honest with you, since I came in 21-22, I've just been seeing red, and every single time we bring it to the board, we see red. So we're kind of looking for the black, right? And ultimately, why is that important? Because I showed on the previous slide, and I'll show again in comparison, a 4.6% projected reserve is not something that we should take lightly. That's a really, that's a very glaring issue that this district has. So some of the key principles the committee looked at for reductions were, number one, you're going to hear me say this a lot, eliminate the encroachment of the restricted resources on the general fund. Eliminate the restricted resources encroachment. So the money comes in for a restricted program, we need to keep it in that program so that it doesn't encroach onto the general fund. Maintain contractual compliance, clearly. That's crucial when developing recommended reductions for a district. Prioritizing sustainable core curriculum programs that are student driven, that drive student achievement. Adopt a balanced budget approach that may require reducing programs when supporting revenues are in decline. I just can't say that enough, right? We've seen it happen over the course of the last few years. And yes, on the horizon, we do have other declining revenues, not as substantial as we saw with ESSER and CARES Act and the COVID funds. I'll just lump it into one title. All right, for this slide, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Adamson.
All right, thank you, Assistant Chief Jones. I'm going to go ahead and just go through the 7 items that are listed on this slide under personnel reductions. And I think I just want to reiterate again what Assistant Chief Jones has just indicated. I think the fact that we are, we number one, we know that we did go ahead and make quite a few reductions last year, and while they helped, we definitely are seeing that it was, simply not enough. And I think what that, speaks to us right now is the fact that, we can no longer look at these as incremental adjustments. We can continue to try and, ebb away at, professional development, but you can see already we've made significant cuts, and really what you're seeing on there remains, what's, required for certification purposes. So really it comes down to whatever we're going to approve for next year really has to be significant. And the word that I keep coming back to that Assistant Super John has used repeatedly is whatever we look at, we need to ensure that programs and continued services are sustainable, right? And that has to be, in the future out years. And I do just want to, add and acknowledge the fact that every recommendation we're bringing before us, it is with number one, reluctance, and, also with an understanding that these are programs and services that, have provided an incredibly important need, and that anything we talk about this evening and are presenting as proposals are by no means indicative of, the level and the quality of that program or, the individuals, leading and guiding and teaching those programs as well. So I think that's really important as we're talking. Everything that we've identified for this evening is really, as Assistant Soup John indicated, is we're looking at that return to and reset to really identify what's necessary, core instruction, and as opposed to, programs that, yes, we know are valuable, but not necessarily necessary and mandated and required. All right, so I think the first, I'm not necessarily going in order I'm going to go ahead and start with number 2 on the list, and that is the elementary Spanish program. Here we are looking at essentially what that would be as a 1.0 full-time employee, FTE, with a savings of annually $146,398. Essentially what we're looking at here, we're looking, when we go back 4 years, I believe it was, when we added that elementary Spanish program, it really was intended as an enrichment program for 4th and 5th graders. And our 4th and 5th graders have absolutely benefited from an incredibly rich program during that time. This particular school year, in an effort to decrease the amount of time that 4th and 5th graders was being taken away from that for instruction, both elementary sites decided to go ahead and extend and expand Spanish offerings to 3rd, 2nd through 5th graders. So what that entailed was students were then, I've only been receiving it once a week. And again, that was as a need, because what we were hearing from our staff was it was becoming incredibly difficult to find big chunks of time to allow for instruction for those core subjects. I do remind the board that, when this program was offered, it was at a time when we really had a lot of additional funding, a lot of it coming as one-time funding coming out of COVID. And so there really was the ability to pay for that program and cover it financially. Obviously, that no longer is the case. And so really the rationale here is that Spanish currently is not a required program. It's a program we've been really fortunate to be able to offer. While we value world language incredibly, we see that as something important for our students. It's something that we have to consider because it's something we can honestly no longer afford, given some of these difficult decisions that we have to make. The proposal here would be to eliminate elementary Spanish during the instructional day and really consider offering Spanish as an after-school enrichment program, adding that to our after-school enrichment program that we offer. The second position, the second program on this list is number 1, that's the digital learning teacher position. Here too, we're looking at the elimination of a equivalency of a 1.0 FTE. This is the digital learning, teaching position has provided high quality, certificated instruction and curricular support in STEM specifically, and technology integration across all grades over the past, goodness, I think it's almost nine years, maybe a little over. And so again, our students have been able to benefit. I know as well that as a result of that position that was created, that each of our school sites now has an incredibly rich STEM lab and a program that the teacher who's been leading that program has been able to develop with very rich lessons that are being able to be delivered, in particular with a strong focus on our elementary students. Eliminating this role, we understand, we acknowledge the fact that this will reduce access to the certificated technology instruction that position currently is able to provide. And definitely will shift technology use that particular time that currently happens at our elementary sites to more of a skills-based, usage-focused content and curriculum model, such as keyboarding and navigation. And again, that would be something that would be continue to be provided by the site techs of the elementary school sites. Technology labs will obviously remain available. Site techs will continue to support student access, and teachers will continue embedding technology into classrooms instruction as appropriate and as they have a need. We anticipate that this may result in maybe less frequent visits to the lab, possibly that shifts to once every 2 weeks as an example. But once again, that would then allow for more instructional time for teachers to really be able to take back a little bit more of the control of their day to allow for those larger chunks of time that are needed for particularly ELA and math core instruction. We know that technology remains incredibly important, and we're seeing that as we're developing our revised EdTech plan, but balance also matters. And so again, like Spanish, this is definitely a program that we have to consider, and that's the reason it is there on the list along with some of the others. Just as a reminder, I think it's important to just point out what remains at the elementary level, that we continue to offer, programs. We're not, going back to only what's required. We will continue to offer that intervention teacher support for our students of highest need at the elementary levels. We have one full-time employee at each of our elementary sites. Music, both choral and instrumental, continues. Physical education, and that reminder that we offer that 5 days a week, which, is definitely unique. Library across all of our sites, and that's really across all of the levels. Instructional aids at our lower elementary levels continues to provide additional learning support for our students. We continue to and will continue to offer one full-time counselor at each of our elementary sites. And then in addition to that, of course, our technology, our techs at each of our sites to, assist with technology instruction. All right, let's see. The next one I will go ahead and cover is our high school library position. The proposal here is to not do away with a librarian or a media tech. It really is to switch that to a classified position. This was actually, again, another proposal that came out through our discussions through the budget subcommittee. And really currently that position is a classified position at the middle and the elementary school site level. And so the proposal is to really be able to, maintain that position, but really do away with the certificated certification that's required, that currently is in place. I think, what's important here is, it's not necessarily, I know, there too, I think our staff and students and the school side has been able to benefit with having a certificated position. Particularly, I think it's incredibly valuable when, a teacher is out or a class needs to be covered. And that's been a definite benefit that the school side and students and staff have been able to, benefit from. But again, this is not necessarily something that is required for the position. We would definitely still continue to have that role. It would just be classified, and then we would continue to maintain that position of clerk to support, that position at the high school level. And the proposal there would really be to, it's maintaining supervision, student access, and of course, any research support for students who are coming, to the library throughout the day. And ultimately, even though I know the position up there, is amount, it would result in an approximately an $87,000 savings because we'd be switching that position to a classified. Once again, making it, equitable across all of our sites, having that same position in place. Next, I'll address number 6. That is the community high school staffing reduction that we are proposing. The community high school program currently offers and operates with approximately it's a 2.4 FTE, serving, currently I think we have 8 to 9 students in that program. The proposal for next year would be to reduce one full-time teacher, but while still maintaining the 0.4 FTE, who currently, serves in that position to offer special educational support. And really, I think what this redesign, what we're looking at for next year, would give the key, would maintain the key components of the program itself, which includes individualized support, the credit recovery component. That's a really important one, and obviously planning, for things along the lines of field trips and career, connected learning that I know takes a lot of time currently. The estimated savings there would be approximately $120,000. We recognize, of course, the incredible value of this program, and really we feel that through some sort of a redesign of the program, we'd be able to just be able to realize some of those cost savings, but while still maintaining the program, because we know this serves currently some of our highest need students, so that would be important. Number 4 on the list is the reduction of one NHT itinerant position. I'll just kind of take us back a little bit through this. You'll recall when we were going through the budget development process this time last year, we did go ahead and make the agreement to maintain that third position as a temporary position. We have, that currently that will expire at the end of this year. That's how the position was posted, and we knew that yes, those funds were one-time funds that end in really June of 2026. What we are proposing right now is 2 options for the board to really be able to discuss and consider. as we look ahead to next year, understanding and knowing, what the needs are, is so the first, essentially is, well, before I even go through the two proposals, we have identified, and, I really want to give thanks and appreciation to Executive Director Cork Anthony, something that she has really been incredibly diligent about since coming into the position, she has, really aggressively been ensuring that we bill for and apply for medical funds. So there's been, significant reimbursement that has been occurring. While it was happening before she arrived, she really, put that priority, on the funding. So we have a good amount of medical funding currently as a result of that. And again, I say kudos to her because even with no additional staff, we know that that's a department of really 2 people, leading the entire district. We've been able to realize some of those additional funds. So option 1 would really be, utilizing those medical funds would be to extend that MHT position as a temporary medical dependent role. That's really important that we focus on that. Option would allow the district to continue the position for, at least 1 additional year into next year while maintaining that flexibility should medical funding decrease. Currently, we don't have enough, I think, assurance that that amount is going to continue, for us to be able to realize, that funding for, the outgoing years. Next year would really allow us to, determine, with certainty that that is something that we can rely on as a sustainable source of revenue. Extending that position for 1 additional year would allow us to, number 1, assess that stability. But again, that would only be a viable option as long as we would be able to post that position as a temporary position and link it directly to that specific source of funding. So that is something we are exploring currently. The second option would be to utilize those funds and put those towards contractual services with Monterey County Behavioral Health. It's definitely, this is the more cautious approach, but it would allow for us to contract to an outside source for individuals to come, for mental health therapists to come in and provide services specifically at the elementary level for our students with IEPs. I think the challenge with this particular option is that MCBH, their contractors, their specialists will only provide services to students with IEPs, so would still leave our non-IEP students who are currently receiving some of those supports and services. And that would really shift that role and responsibility over to our counselors at the elementary level. That is, what would have occurred before our mental health therapists came in. But again, that's definitely something that we have to consider as we make those decisions. So both options would keep costs neutral to the general fund and avoid creating an unfunded permanent obligation that we're really trying to avoid moving forward. Number 3 on that list is a 1.0 FTE elementary teacher, and this is a reduction that is based solely on enrollment-driven class size adjustments. Based on projected enrollment sizes and numbers for next year, we are going to see 1 grade level that would no longer support the need for 3 teachers at a particular grade level, and so really it would be the result of a reduction of one of those positions. And all staffing, as we've stated and as we have practiced in the past, obviously continues to align with enrollment, as we know that it must. And then the last position there is the Adult Transition Program, part of our ATP program, and this is specific to paraeducator staffing. We're looking at an estimated savings here of $78,000. And this again is based purely on staff enrollment. We are looking at a reduction in the number of students. We have several students graduating out of that program and not a lot transitioning into it just based on, the grade levels of, upcoming students. In fact, we're looking at that for at least the next 2 years. That will be a really small program. So as a result, we have the, ability to be able to reduce. We won't have that need for all of the paraprofessionals who are currently working in that program. Essentially, it's a reduction from 5 paraeducators to 3. It's a reduction of 2. So that really is, those are the personnel reductions. I think just, in closing, before I hand it back over to Assistant Superintendent John, that reminder that we are not alone in these difficult, changes that we and decisions and reductions we're having to make. I am in close contact with particularly our two neighboring, districts in PGUSD and Carmel. We meet regularly. But just last week at MCRE, during a public hearing that they had, MCRE staff actually shared, an overview of all of our districts in Monterey, and there are significant deficits. I mean, we're talking, multi-million dollar deficits the districts across the county and really across the state are facing. These are not decisions we want to have to be making, but at the same time, when compared to, what others are having to, look at and consider, again, we're not alone. I think that's the important piece there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and return that back to you, Mr. Jordan.
Before we move on to operational reductions discussion, does the board have any?
Or do you have any questions
Okay,
about
question.
the personnel reductions that were just presented? And again, there'll be time to discuss at the end of the meeting, but just any questions about the presentation?
I have a question about the adult transition. Is not coming out of the adult school budget. No.
Yeah, so, yeah. Go ahead, Carly.
It is funded by the special ed, which the general fund does give a contribution to. So it would reduce the contribution from unrestricted.
Okay for now. Thanks.
Okay, operational reductions, you'll see in the middle there. We took a look again at travel and conference, 20% reduction, 23,271. And the district's going to maintain a 20% reduction. Now, where it's tough to maintain a 20% reduction ongoing is with tied restricted programs. I mentioned that before on a couple of the previous slides. Materials and supplies maintaining a 5% reduction, which we already reduced last year, 55,000. Item 3, this is the school resource officer budget, 100% reduction out of 26-27 budget. Item 4, the elementary summer school program. We did take a look through the subcommittee at the summer school program related to ELA and related to our reading intervention. And this was a recommended reduction to bring forward of 65,836. And Lewis, if you could just click on that really quick, kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at and then zoom in. So you can see where this is the total cost of operating the summer school ELD and reading intervention program. You can see the number of the basically four staff teachers totaling around 44,000 for the summer. You can see the breakdown by grade, breakdown by student number of hours associated, and then of course the hourly rate associated with each one of those instructors. Also the costs, there's other costs to the program there, non-SPED administration, special education IAs, a health clerk and clerical staff. So all in all, that's totaling 65,836 if the board gave the district direction to eliminate or press pause on the elementary summer school reading intervention and ELD. And I'll stop there with questions or comments before we move on.
So yeah, I was confused about it. So that's the budget you're saying. Basically, this is a proposed just elimination of there would be no summer school this coming year.
There would be ESY summer school for our extended school year for our special education population, and then there would be credit recovery high school summer school,
Right, but
not for elementary.
not for the elementary. Okay, I wasn't clear from this if this was a reduction in the budget or a pause. So thank you for that clarification.
And to be clear, on the last slide, you don't have to go back to it, Lewis. You saw like ELOP. Really, what those are, we still plan to operate the summer program with the city of Pacific Grove, our ELOP summer program, full day program. So those numbers, some of those students were ELOP summer program, summer camp students, as well as reading intervention ELD students. So to be clear, we will maintain the ELOP program in the summer. The 5, the Freeze on Fund 14 transfer. So a little history there. About 4 years ago, the board I know that at the time it was a great decision to begin transferring from the general fund unrestricted dollars to support Fund 14 and Fund 40. That is our deferred maintenance fund and our capital assets outlay reserve fund. And the rationale for that was there was essentially no revenue source assigned from the state or from the general fund to support capital outlay or deferred maintenance. I want to say deferred maintenance at the time had less than $100,000 beginning balance with extensive amount of expenditures tied to it. And Fund 40 was essentially balancing itself out with the revenue generated off of David Avenue School. The board last year, so within this year's budget, froze the Fund 40 transfer of $200,000 from Fund 01. So it doesn't exist anymore. And now we're proposing the freeze on Fund 14 transfer. That's not really a sustainable long-term solution, but it's certainly something we need to look at, when we're considering sizable reductions across the district. Measure D was essentially a deferred maintenance bond, and we've exhausted Measure D, but with the passage of Measure B and a lot of the modernization that's being proposed, that entire program we brought to the board on the 5th for discussion. We feel like now's a good time as a recommendation to pause that unrestricted general fund transfer to Fund 14, eliminating the $200,000 obligation in perpetuity, or again, we need to work through the planning on this, but certainly for the next few years, it certainly makes sense. On the revenue and program adjustment side, these numbers are very small, but I think the important thing to note is item number 1, which is increased athletics revenue. So the general fund supports high school athletics to the tune of around $150,000. We've had prior years where the support's been in the $250,000 to $280,000 range, and that's really being supplemented by one-time restricted resources that were pulled back. But projected ongoing, the athletics department is going to need $150,000 plus to sustain travel, like buses, referees, league dues. Right, there's all those things that are not generated through fundraising and coaching staff and through Baker's Club. So that 30,000 could be higher, and I will say that we're kind of beta testing this spring the gate fees. So one thing this district has not done, as far as I'm aware, for some time now, is aside from around 3 or 4 fall sports, and I think 1 winter sport, collected gate fees for our spring sports and for many of the other sports in the fall and in the winter. So we'd like to implement gate fees. We'd like to implement potentially a full league card program. So this is basically in development right now, and we're trying to beta test it this spring. So that $30,000 in revenue, I think, is a low projection. But again, that $30,000 in revenue is not going to help mitigate overall the general fund, but it could reduce the $150,000 contribution from the fund to $120,000 or $100,000 or even less is what we're driving towards. So we've had a couple of meetings with the high school staff, with Athletic Director Powers, and he has some really great ideas as to how to approach a new revenue source that's sustainable to provide support to our athletic programs. So more to come on that. But right now, we're proposing a $30,000 increase in revenue to offset that general fund contribution, and then a shift of our gate contributions to site funds, which the general fund had been contributing to as well. There was more substantive conversation around many of the other programs related to gate and AVID that came through our budget subcommittee, but they didn't flesh out through the subcommittee's recommendations. So you're not seeing those tonight. These are the recommendations on the revenue side. So in summary, at the bottom, you'll see ongoing relief of $809,575. That's general fund relief in perpetuity, one-time reduction relief of $174,268. Operational ongoing relief, you can see is for on the operational side, $169,168 ongoing, and then measured relief, that's at $200,000 on Fund 14. I say measured because we're going to have to readdress that at some point down the road to maintain a healthy balance in Fund 14 to support deferred maintenance. And then revenue and program ongoing, you can see right there, $36,192 will be the new revenue derived. Slide. There we go. Thanks, Liz. So with reduction of expenditures, we needed to look at ongoing expenses as well. And as I mentioned previously in the presentation, and I'll make a note right now, this is kind of what we know of at this point in time, at this snapshot in time. We haven't began the process of budget development with our sites. We're currently in the interim reporting part of our budget cycle right now, whereby we have to do our second interim report, which is expenditures through January 31st. Once we get through second interim reporting, we start our budget development process. But these were some needs of the district that we know at this point in time. Again, these needs might grow, which would overall reduce the projected savings through the proposals this evening. But we have two, and one is an increased health clerk at the high school at 0.75 FTE. That's an increase of 73,492. And as you'll see there, the district nurse has currently been filling that role for some time now. There's no vacancy, and really, there is certainly a need for our district nurse to serve in the role of district nurse and not necessarily a site-specific health clerk. So certainly a need there. So we're proposing an increase in expenditures there. And then related to the reductions that Dr. Adamson spoke to, the 0.75 FTE library media technician to support the high school. That's an increased a new expenditure of 78,155. And of course, that position is supported by there's a library media tech through that's at the high school right now. That's a 0.5 FTE. So all in all, there'd be 1.25 FTE to support the high school. So here's the summary, and we've kind of talked through this as we go, but I think it's important to re-highlight. We're looking at personnel reductions on the top, operational reductions in revenue and program adjustments. That's all across the top. New ongoing expenditures in the middle, and then overall budgetary relief summary down below. You can see that we're proposing a total budget reduction, including one time of just about 1.4 million. Some of the ongoing expenditures for a total ongoing unrestricted general fund relief of just over $1 million. And again, I know you may be thinking about the math there. So the 1.4 million includes one time. That is, if the district were to no longer retain the mental health therapist and or move that into a general fund obligation. So in total, new net multi-year UGF relief on the unrestricted general fund side of just over $1 million. And here's a really important slide for us to look at. So with the projections, you can see they're 26, 27, and 27, 28. So if you're looking at this again, the metrics are the same. I showed this before. This was on multi-year projection for 26, 27, and 27, 28 in its current state. If you look at the column in green at the top, metric being in green, 26, 27 projections with the reductions. And again, the 26, 27 projections include 2% increase to salary schedule, 0.5% increase to health and welfare. You can see here that the change from the column to the left there is relatively substantial. It is halting the slide on deficit spending substantially. You can see a beginning fund balance of, again, it's the same 5.1 million from this year to next. You can see the revenue there is the same as in the projections from this year to next. But you'll see on the expenditure side, a reduction of expenditures from 51,407,000 to 50,438,000. You'll see there still is a deficit projected in the 26-27 year of 831,600, but you can see the breakdown below, which is substantially different than the breakdown in the column to the left. On the unrestricted side, it's down around 660,000. Restricted side is down a little bit to 516, but overall, you'll see starting to see an ending fund balance that's relatively healthy for our district of 4,339,612. And again, I'll re-highlight the fact that our monthly liabilities in our district are around that amount. Meaning if we were to experience economic uncertainty in our district, we at a minimum would have enough to maintain our monthly liabilities for 1 month. It does bring the reserve level up to 8%. So that is good news as it relates to implementing all of the projections, the projected reductions brought forward tonight. 27, 28 projections versus current versus implementation of all of the reductions proposed tonight. This is the first time since I've been here that I've seen a multi-year projection that shows the unrestricted general fund in the black. That's a surplus. So you'll see a beginning fund balance of 4.3 million in the out year, revenue of 4.1, again, unchanged from the prior year projection, but again, a reduction in expenditures from 51,887 down to 50,918. You see a small deficit on the restricted side, but on the unrestricted side, we see a surplus. An ending fund balance of 4.8 million and a reserve level is ticking up to 9.1%. So all in all, I mean, you can see the summary down below. Really, what we're looking at here with the recommendations tonight is essentially stopping the slide that this district's been experiencing for over 6 years now. Lifting a 5.6% reserve to an 8% reserve, and a projected 4.6 reserve to a 9.1% reserve, which is pretty dramatic. I'll pause there for questions or comments from the board.
Board, any questions or comments at this point?
I think just one that I know it's stated in bold there, but there are no increases in salary in the 27-28 projection.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And then the other part, I'll just say, you mentioned about this, like I think I agree with you, and my memory could be 100% wrong here, Assistant Superintendent John, that we haven't seen the black on the unrestricted for an out year, but I do feel like we've made decisions to try to get there, but we keep hitting, I don't want to say like wrong turns, but we keep hitting these unexpected costs or unexpected cancellations, like you were saying, like the light switch. Some of them were expected, but I feel like we have seen black on unrestricted funds looking multiple years out with some of the decisions we've made, but that's clearly not what we're experiencing, if that makes sense, because of, again, a number of factors we've already discussed.
Yeah, there's a lot that kind of unpack there that lends to this. There are certain constants that we build into our expenditure projections, which are step and column, CPI increase, utility cost increases. Those are our managed costs, right? Negotiated settlements are also managed costs, but this district has had negotiated settlements every year. We've been deficit spending as well, so that also can lend to the deficit.
Let me give some examples from my memory. So again, I could be completely wrong, but I'm thinking of there have been fees, associated with instructional days at the high school that are not in any of your projections, right? Like years out, like, we don't plan to have a chargeback. We also, thinking of other examples like that, which I think my brain just went.
The MAMA assessment was one.
Exactly. The financial payment we had to make due to the lack of fiscal solvency of our healthcare.
SIG assessment.
SIG, yeah. That was a big one again. So these are the things that, again, get really difficult for me to wrestle with, because we don't project for that, right? That's not part of the process, but we need to be projecting for some of this fiscal uncertainty, even if not on paper, in planning, so that when these additional fees come up, we're not like, hey, we made some good decisions. Oh, no, we're back where we started again because of these additional things that come through. And so that's just, I don't have a good answer to that, but that's the one that I'm kind of wrestling with a lot here, because it's hard to account for in the numbers.
Yeah, I would say, to add to that, and ask Carly this, but I would say last year our budget to actuals might have been the tightest this district's been in some time. We were less than 1% off, which is, 3% is a relatively normal swing. So I guess from projected expenditures to actual expenditures was really tight last year, and it's kind of looking that way this year. We have the anomalies on the revenue side for us, certainly, right? But it's really tough to project those anomalies, right? We're not certain if we're going to receive prior year tax receipts or delinquent tax receipts, or there's a number of other items. Yeah. So, it's really tough to kind of point the finger at look, on the revenue side, if with Prop 19, which was passed a few years ago, the impacts of Prop 19, we have not seen in our district, which is effectively seeing a year-over increase in property tax revenue through home sales, right? Like you look at, and I'm not going to go down a kind of take a boardwalk here, but I think it's important to note that, our neighboring district, that's a basic aid district, around 30% of their property basically is not a Prop 13 capped property, meaning that, the tax revenue levied off of 30% of their properties is relatively constant and steady because it's been in families for some time. And so on and so forth, right? We're flip-flopped, we're the opposite. Over 60% of the properties in our district are basically a Prop 13 capped property, which means that, as an example, a home was bought for $150,000 in 1972. They're still paying property taxes on the home that was bought in 1972. So over 60% of our assessed valuation is more or less locked in. So you're not seeing that influx of revenue. It's certainly something we've been talking about for the last 3 years. We just haven't realized it. So
And I just want to be clear, this is not meant at all as a, like, you guys have made mistakes. You guys, the budgets you presented have been, like you said, spot on. It's just, how do we prepare for that uncertainty in our long-term planning when our revenue to expenditure is so narrow? And that's again, I'm throwing that out there not to get you to answer it, but no. But I'm saying, like, this is just an issue that we have that needs further addressing, you know. If that makes sense.
Anything else from the board at this time?
I know that's small. On the last slide, I'm just going to cover very quickly the budget solicitation timeline. So, January 7th, we did meet with our leadership team and go through some of the discussion points that came out of our subcommittee. And again, the budget subcommittee, which was represented by PGTA, CSEA, and administration, had 3 meetings where the information being presented tonight was where it came from. So we had a meeting with our leadership team January 7th to discuss. Tonight we're having January 13th, we had our final budget subcommittee meeting. Since then, we've met with PGTA and CSCA. They also, again, they were represented at the meetings that we had at the subcommittee. Tonight is our board study session where we reviewed everything bulleted here. January 22nd through February 5th, we're going to continue with our site meetings, talking with our sites, gaining further input, first with opening further discussion. Early to late February, we'll have a community information session, and that's kind of all based on the outcome of the direction that staff receives from the board tonight. We do have a board meeting on February 5th where staff would like to bring forward an information item, non-action item related to reductions. February 26th, we'll have a special board meeting, which will require an action, and that's the layoff resolution and tie-breaking criteria presented by Chief Rogerman in Human Resources. February 5th through March 14th, again, I mentioned we're going through the budget development process as soon as we get through interim reporting. So that starts in February, and that will actually continue all the way through. I put through March 14th, but it's going to continue until annual budget adoption, which is in June. We'll have a March 5th board meeting, which is an action item for any layoffs associated with the direction given by the board. And then on May 21st, we will have public hearings for our LCAP and budget adoption. June 4th, we will have an action item for our budget adoption and our LCAP. Which concludes my presentation for the evening, but certainly we will begin further discussion.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation. We will now move on to public comment. Public comment for this item is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, not to exceed 20 minutes on the entire item. Just to note that the board cannot respond to public comment. We can direct something to staff to be addressed further. And this is a meeting of the board business under the Brown Act conducted in public. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of winging my public comment speech because it is not sitting right in front of me right now, but I think those are the basics, and we can begin now. We will alternate between online and in person if we have any. If anyone in person would like to approach the podium, you're welcome. Yes. Oh, yes, please. And there is a microphone button. You'll see a green light. There's no button, excuse me. You'll see a green light to start the 3 minutes, and then the yellow and red for warning and time.
Alex Morrison, District Librarian. I'm going to get as much as I can out because it's been a very difficult week. On Friday, I learned that my position was going to be removed. And I think what's happening here is that there's a lack of understanding of what a teacher librarian does inside of a library. So I had a whole speech, but I just want to walk you through one of my days today. Friday, I was told my position would be removed. Today, I was responsible for supervising over 100 students. So 1/5 of our school population at the high school. 70 at lunch and then 30, in throughout the day, and then handing out materials to them. Materials that I curated and picked and arranged. I was also being the credentialed employee. We have a testing center in the library. So we will not be able to have a testing center in the library if there is not a credentialed employee in the room. And that is something that helps with accommodations for students. I was checking out several books that I curated for students, walking them through and giving them recommendations and helping them with that. I was proctoring the map testing that was going on today. So again, that was another class of about 40 to 50, along with helping out with troubleshooting throughout the entire school. So I would go and help them out if they needed it. I will also be teaching 5 classes in EBSCO research next week and digital literacy. So I'll be teaching those. And then our bearded dragon passed away this morning. So, which I've been working hand in hand with Audrey on working with her students who needed the support. And that was a main support. So we had to talk through with them and make sure they were all right. And it's been something, so I've been working hand in hand with her. I also wanted to say one more thing about the idea of, I heard that some of the technology teaching may go towards our classified librarians. I thought that was mentioned as a possibility, but I just wanted to say something, whether that's true or not, that our classified librarians are work tirelessly, incredibly hard, and they are the greatest asset that we have at our elementary and middle school sites for mental health, and they work and they don't get paid nearly enough for taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We'll go to the commenter online now. Zoe Schultz, you have the floor. If you can unmute. There you go.
Thanks very much.
Mhm.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation. I thought this was very well thought out on behalf of the subcommittee and staff. And I'm happy to see that the board and staff are looking at a multi-year approach. Because coming into tonight's presentation, I was thinking, why are we here again just after last year, considering some of these similar reductions? One program that I would like to advocate for its continuance is the elementary Spanish school program that has been of great benefit. I advocated for Spanish language instruction at its onset. I think it was during the COVID years. I understand some of these things were funded through one-time funding. But I do think this is a really great program that I understand is not mandatory, but it's a really great program. I actually think the Spanish language instruction throughout the curriculum of PGUSD is not sufficient and should be bolstered rather than cut. So cuts to this and suggesting that after school enrichment, which is a paid program, I don't think is a wise move on behalf of the district. I do appreciate all the extra education on top of what our students get in their core subjects. And I do feel that having language is a requirement for a lot of college graduations and success in career path, and being fluent in Spanish is very important for the trajectory of our children. I actually believe that we should probably flip the Spanish language instruction on its head and start getting Spanish immersion at very young grades, rather than kind of chasing chasing that effort as children get older. And that was a comment I had when the program was adopted. But generally speaking, I think, unfortunately, tough decisions are having to be made. I appreciate the thought that went into this and just would advocate for the continuance of that one program. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Any other commenters in the room? Go ahead. Whoever would like to go first. You have the floor, Ms. Cordova.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Audrey Cordova, I'm a mental health therapist at for the district. I'm at PG High, PG Community High, and I see people at ATP. Less than a month ago, into my temporary assignment as a mental health therapist at PG High School and PG Community High School, this was 3 years ago, I received a call on a Sunday morning that one of our students died. In our grief, our community committed to prevent any more tragedies by offering our students more support. The proposed cuts to mental health and certificated staff at PG Community High and PG High School, our librarian, has me worried that we've forgotten. We have multiple years of data that students use more help for mental health and substance abuse intervention every year. The need keeps growing and it exceeds our resources every single year. Taking away certificated staff like the librarian, like a mental health therapist, like a certificated teacher at Community High impacts hundreds of our students' well-being and access to safe spaces for prosperity, security, and belonging. To reduce anything at PG Community High means we undervalue the importance of students who've been marginalized and finally found a safe space for prosperity and belonging there. These are students who've used all of the traditional resources we've had on our campus. And despite all that, needed and finally found a space, in the words of one student, that's better in all the ways. So please, 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 I know you're thinking about it. I know that it's not an easy decision, but I really, 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 as a community member, as a provider of mental health services, as somebody who, for the past almost 4 years, every single day, I'm confronted with all of the things. We read about them in the paper. We read about tragedy. Every single day, we are so close to just being dangerously with the budget, right? Dangerously close to being in the red, but also dangerously close for being in the red for risk to the safety and wellness of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Go ahead in the room.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I would like to address the subject of my dad being laid off. Is that correct? Okay. I just would like to say that he is in like the center of the school. He has always been there to help out all the teachers, and he substitutes and stands in for lots of classes, and he helps with tech and taking out the books. Like just today, we have tons of students from my English class sent because of map testing, and they sent the students right to him, and he helped them out. And I would also like to address the issue that if he gets laid off, I no longer get to attend the school. And I would also like to say, adding on to Miss Cordova, she had a really good point with the substance abuse and stuff for the kids. I see that a lot in the school bathrooms and tons of stuff. It is a really big issue. And I think a lot of them do go to Miss Cordova. And I think her position is also very important. Going back to my dad, he really tries his best, and I think he definitely does more than he's asked to do. And it just, yeah, put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else online or in the room who would like to make a comment? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Robin Peterson. I am a freshman at Pacific Grove High School, and I would like to address the issue of our district librarian being laid off. Now, our library is at the center of the school, both figuratively and literally. Countless students every day come to research new topics and use the countless facilities, the countless tools available to them to pursue their academic efforts. Just today, I printed out the introductory paragraph to my essay on Homer's Odyssey using resources in the library that I would not have been able to access without sufficient leadership in our library section of our school. Additionally, any district's librarian, especially one as skilled as Mr. Morrison in the front row, is essential to the growth of our schools and district's library programs. Our library programs, or at least when I attended them, were fine, they were good, but in order to pursue future growth, we need to have a district librarian who can keep our focus on the right track so that kids can learn not just to read properly and analyze text, but also to love reading. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Go ahead.
Hi, another Morrison here. I'm Shannon Morrison, wife of Alex Morrison, and I want to tell you a story. Alex Morrison was hired to be the digital media specialist, aka library technician at Monterey High School back in 2011. And we relocated with our infant child. We actually met the Peterson family at Parents' Place at the adult school, and we lived on Lighthouse Avenue. And my husband used to ride his bicycle because we shared a car. And we were living below the poverty line on the classified salary schedule at Monterey High School in MPUSD. Several years later, I think it was 5 or 6 years later after working in this classified position, which by the way, he was hired as a media specialist. And then day one, they stuck him in the library like, oh, you're also in charge of checking out these books too. It wasn't made clear that that was part of the position, that he was actually doing the role of a librarian, but not being paid or recognized for that work. So fast forward 5 or 6 years, and the position, I am forgetting her name. The former library, PGI. Carolyn was retiring, and Alex applied for the position, and he was hired contingent on going back to school, obtaining a master's degree and his credential, of which he took out student loans to do, and he got the certification. This is his second master's. He has an MFA in media already, which is what made him drawn to the other position, and it was during the recession last time, which it feels like we're coming back to another recession with all of this, as we're saying, the school districts all around us are having these challenges. But he has had the training, which is really essential in this time when our .gov websites are no longer viable sources of information. He is connected with the teacher librarian network to know what is up and coming, what is the things that our children need to know about as they're writing research papers. How is AI going to impact our students in our classrooms? We already see kids using AI in inappropriate ways, getting around actually writing essays. And he goes to the elementary school starting as early as 5th grade, talking to the kids about what it is, what a good source is, what a viable source is, having that digital literacy and knowledge. And I see that my time is close to expire, but I just really want to advocate, because I just don't understand why we would eliminate this essential position, who supervises the other techs. He's the only credentialed librarian in the district, and he provides support to all of the library techs, and they meet monthly. This is not, it's for a reason that there was a credentialed position. Please don't change this.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark W. Clark. I'm the Spanish teacher at Pacific Grove Middle School. People might know me as Senor Clark. I love teaching Spanish because of a million different reasons. One of the new reasons I've been able to discover recently, starting last year when we expanded to a 6th grade Spanish elective wheel, is a new level of excitement of students who feel capable, who feel energized, who feel really excited to explore the culture, the Spanish-speaking culture, using the Spanish language. And that's due wholly in part to the wonderful work done by our teacher at the elementary school level. And eliminating her position would be a dire mistake from the school district. Additionally, I want to mention Mr. Morrison. The average adult in the United States reads at a 6th grade level right now. Eliminating programs that promote literacy is a massive disservice to our community. I think that's something to consider. Additionally, our students need to learn how to assess viable sources and appropriate use of technology and AI. That's another thing that needs to be discussed as well. I fully support the preservation of the Spanish program and of the library position at the high school. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, go ahead and go up to the podium.
Hi, good evening. My name is Randy Buckley. I am a parent of one of our speakers tonight. I'm a little jet lagged. I go to graduate school in England, low residency program, and I was at the Bodleian Library earlier this week. It's a work of art. And getting the tour of the Bod, as we call it, I get to call it that now as a student, we learn that the university is as good as its library. It's as prestigious, but it is as educational as its library. And that is the culture there. And I think about what I often read in your newsletters, thank you, the culture of we. And I think we have to ask the question, who do we want to be? Right now, without a Spanish program, without mental health, with decreasing library services, the district becomes less attractive. And I see that enrollment number that you've pointed out shrinking over time. And without crucial services, it becomes less attractive. That enrollment will drop. And of course, I suspect you'll have similar challenging conversations about budget. But as an existentialist, that question comes back to me again and again. Not just where do I want my kids to be, but the culture of we that is so important. How do we make this work? How do we preserve the integrity of the school district? How do we preserve the high quality standards? And I think that starts with keeping an outstanding librarian of highest level and these other incredible programs. And I just have to say, whatever Senor Clark says, you should go with it. Big fan. So thank you very much. I know this is very challenging, hard deliberations. And I also think we're incredibly creative. And the culture of we needs to come together now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no further public comment, and also because we've reached approximately the end of our 20-minute period, I will bring the discussion back. Can we please take a 5-minute bio break, and then that is not because because I need 5 minutes, and then we will return for the board discussion on this item. Bless you. And on that note,
I have one more comment.
thank you for warning. We will bring it back to the board now for discussion of the presentation and the information we received tonight. Just as a note, we're not taking any action as a board tonight, but the board can give direction or recommendations to staff for next steps or moving forward. So with that, I will open it up to the trustees. If there's anyone who would like to start us off, you're welcome to. Trustee Wax, you included. I don't want to forget you in Zoom land.
I am not forgotten. Thanks.
Thank you.
I can start if no one else is chomping at the bit. I see you reaching for the mic as well. Clerk Charles, but I wanted to say, one thing, just within the discussions, some of the stuff that was brought up. One of my preferences, given the way you laid this out, would for the Medi-Cal funds option. If we have to give some direction on that, that's one that I'm leaning towards over the MCBH contract. I mean, partially we moved away from the MCBH contract for a reason, and even though it's going backwards, I don't want us to go backwards. Let's say it that way. The other thing I was going to say, just really quickly on this too, and then I'll put together just with some high level comments, is that, I'd like us to explore at least a board norm, if not a board policy, on one-time funds going towards only, again, contractual, rather than so the problem is, as a board, we come on, blink on and off, and we don't understand always until year 1 or 2 of serving. So we need to have a way that as a board, we're providing that background to new board members to say, when you put one-time fund, positions on the general fund, the sustainability just simply is not there, because it's a lot easier to say no at the beginning than to say no where we are now. And then just quickly on the high level, I do want to say thank you to the budget subcommittee, including the district staff here tonight and those that participated. And unusually, I agreed, and we don't normally say this, but with all the comments made at the microphone tonight as well, I honestly hope we would be in a better position by making some difficult decisions in the past few years. But it's clear that, for a number of reasons, spending has continued to increase faster than revenue. And again, that's some of our issues. That's some issues from, I don't want to say, but I'll say higher powers in a educational sense. I'll also express my disappointment with the management team as a whole. And I'm being honest about that, because merely putting myself in the spotlight here, I was one of the ones here that has been supporting, again, the structural deficit spending. And it's a problem that we can't keep kicking the can on. That 4.6% number is about as scary as it gets for a board member. That's something we are trained from day one on. So, I do think, given our existing costs as a district, we need to continue pursuing one-time funds to offer some basic services for our district, which is really a disappointing place to be. But I also recognize this is not a permanent solution. And frankly, while we all, I think, may wish things were better financially, I can't say enough how wholeheartedly I wish they were. I feel we simply are at a place we do not have alternatives for making some necessary decisions, even when painful. So please hope, again, everyone in the room, everyone know these decisions we're making are not something that are going to help us sleep at night. But we're stuck in the world that we, as a society and as a board and as a management team, have created. So I will stop with my comments there.
Okay, I will take over.
Okay.
Okay, first about the librarian. That's definitely off the table for me. Okay, the librarian is integral to the comprehensiveness of a high school. It's got to be a certificated position. It should not be equated with what's going on at the elementary libraries. It's different. We've always had a certificated librarian. We will continue to have a certificated librarian because it will crumble what comprehensiveness we have managed to keep together at a high school that has shrunk and that has a lot of pride. So number one, that's for me. And then let's just stay on the high school for a minute because I think, okay, the idea of increasing gates at the athletics is, and I would like to hear Dan Powers' suggestions on what he might want to do with this, but just increasing gate fees is counterproductive in my opinion, because we don't have enough people coming to the games to begin with. We want more people to come to games. We sure don't want to start charging the kids, the students, fees to come into the games. No, it's important, again, for the comprehensiveness of a high school to have your sports program solid, dependable. Last board meeting, I asked the student rep, what does she think about the size of the high school? What does she talk about? She knew 4 or 5 kids from middle school that decided not to go to our high school, to go to Stevenson, Carmel, wherever. But she didn't say that those kids decided to go to those schools because they had better academics. No. They went to those schools because they wanted to get a sports scholarship. Somehow those sport programs were showing off better than ours. And that's a real fact. Okay? It's part of the comprehensiveness, again, of the high school. It's meaningful. It's so meaningful to the kids. We got to have at least a couple of teams that are winning. Okay, got to. So we need to look at that. And I'll be glad to get together with Dan, and because I do think there's ways to increase financially support from the public for our sports programs. There are ways, and so I'm just putting that out there because I think trying to it's already difficult for the older people to come to games because they don't know how to use their iPhone to use the new system of how you pay for your entry. I've heard a lot of, people that have complained they can't give you cash just to get in. So that's something I'm kind of big on. The digital learning teacher, again, I think when we instituted that position, do you know when that position was started?
He's 9, 10 years. I'm looking back at the directive. I know, 9 years. Yeah, 9 years.
Okay. It probably coincided with our funding with
the bond.
Yes, with the bond.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yes. Again, this position, I mean, in this day and age, I don't see how we get away from that. I mean, it's only going to become more necessary. And I think what we really have to look at, and I know that, I mean, I threw this out there one other time when we were talking about the preschool position. When we start looking at how much staff we have and what the expectations are of this community, because the community drives what we do. We are not staffed at the elementary levels to our contracts, are we? Why? You know why? Because the parents won't like that. So we don't do that. We don't put 29 kids in second grade. Okay? We don't do that because we get a lot of flack for that. All right. So I'm just saying that even though our contract with the teacher says we can, right? But and I have the experience of looking back for when I was on the board before, and all those times we could have done that too. And we got a lot of flack for that. They don't want that. Okay, so when you're looking at personnel and you're looking at cutting really key personnel, we're not really talking about personnel that is fluff. Then you have to start talking about a parcel tax, because there is no other way we are going to get the kind of revenue. We aren't. There's no subdivision going in. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Now, maybe we could look at, a smaller type of parcel tax, nothing big, but it has to be considered, because this is where we are. And I don't see us getting beyond this other than every year trying to make sure that our reserve stays at least at 5%. Even 5% is, that's nothing. But so those are my comments.
Trustee Wax?
And unfortunately, I don't have much to. I mean, I have lots of thoughts in my head, but I cannot verbalize them right now because I'm not thinking clearly. But that is to say, I don't really have anything right now. But this is a continuance of a really unfortunate situation that we've found ourselves in, and I am sorry for anyone who is affected. That's students and staff. Even if nothing comes to pass, the worry is real. So I apologize about that. But when looking at the presentation, to echo Dr. Hazen's comments, we have to make some really unfortunate decisions, which pain us all. And yeah, I don't really have too much to add to that. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll go last, and I feel like it is kind of a somber moment because we do have before us decisions that are impacting people and students and our community. And, we found ourselves last year in a similar predicament, and we were ready as a board to kind of change course and stop spending in a deficit and try to get back towards a balanced budget. We did make a few cuts last year, but it wasn't enough to change course, right? This is going to take us multiple years to turn ourselves in a different direction. I appreciate staff for providing us recommendations that are based on data in enrollment. And being on the budget subcommittee, I know I can say that there are no like rocks giant boulders we haven't unturned where there's going to be a pot of money and we're all going to be able to, be fiscally solvent. That just isn't the nature of education. Unfortunately, it's not just us. But we'll continue to look for more opportunities for creating revenue. Athletics is a great idea. I think, as we've gone through this process, it's become collaborative in a way that we can reach out to our partners in the unions, and hopefully we'll get more recommendations or ideas from staff at the sites, because it is going to take everybody looking at it through our own lenses and providing our perspectives for us to figure out what to do next. Sitting on the budget subcommittee, I had the benefit of hearing perhaps and just kind of fleshing out some of these things a bit more in detail. I'll say for myself, just to tap on a few items that I had questions about with regard to like the digital learning teacher and the value of that. I absolutely think digital learning is going to be important moving forward. I think we are also seeing that is more integrated into what teachers are coming on board with. New teachers are I don't want to say already have, but have a skill set that they bring for being able to navigate and use the digital learning platforms. That's not to say there isn't value in the lessons and the work that's been done there. But again, like we have to find places to make cuts. And so I tried to look at it as a needs versus wants. And I know that's still difficult, but our needs are the things we set as goals in the LCAP, like ELA and intervention and our reading level scores for certain groups. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's elementary Spanish. And that's not to say reading intervention is more important, but I think when we prioritize what we need, and we need to have our students reading at grade levels, Spanish becomes kind of a want, an important want. One I want for my kids. Love the idea of dual immersion. I know I brought that to Dr. Adamson, like in the first couple months she was here, and she made a note for another day. The mental health therapist, I'm in favor of the same proposal as you, as far as going the Medi-Cal route for billing. And thank you to Director Cork Anthony for exploring that for us. Understanding that we're staffing with the elementary teachers and the paras to enrollment. And can you talk a little bit more about community high, like what we're proposing, what that might look like if there is a cut?
So, currently we have 2 certificated full-time teachers. The idea would be reducing that to 1 lead full-time teacher. In addition to that, we also have a teacher who is kind of shared between, PG high school and community high school, who comes over as a 0.4 FTE to support students on IEPs, so students with disabilities. And so I think the idea for that for next year would be to utilize a component of that 0.4 FTE to serve alongside the lead teacher to do a combination of co-teaching. There may be a need for us to bring in additional support for the special ed components of it, but we really utilize, see that as a possibility of in the mornings, at least still being able to maintain, 2 certificated teachers who are there while the students are there. And then the remaining part of that 0.4, is there are other responsibilities that, that particular teacher would then, cover at PG high school. We would still maintain the support that's currently provided by the MHT, and additional, resources along those lines, but it would essentially be 1 full-time and then a 0.4 FTE.
Thank you.
That has not been fleshed out at this point. That really would require, planning and we haven't gotten to that point yet because right now it's a proposal, right? But all of that about being, maintaining the integrity of that program and ensuring, the support and needs are there. Student counts, right? Yeah, which
I think it's. President McNary is on the subcommittee, so she knows this. But for the greater discussion, we currently have 9 students there, broken down by 5 and 11th and 12th and 4 and 12th. So I don't know right now if you've identified any additional students that might be moving over next year. I didn't build that into enrollment projections, but the enrollment projections suggest 5 students there next year, right? Moving up from 11th to 12th. So, and right now with the staffing at 2.4 FTE for 9 students, I mean, you know, it's funny. There's a very soft spot in my heart for that program. My brother went to community high school. I knew like I want to say like 90-something% of my friends went to community high school when it was right here, right with the dome, and you know that program is amazing. And I love you know I love the teaching staff that are there, and I visit the site quite a bit. But when we're looking at staffing to enrollment, like that's why this came into consideration as a recommendation to the committee.
Yeah. And that being said, staffing to enrollment, but knowing that these students have high needs or additional needs and still ensuring that we're not cutting anybody short. Okay. That makes more sense to me. The district librarian one is also kind of tricky because that one's tricky for me. I think because when we talk about prioritizing mental health and safe spaces and not being able to necessarily afford more mental health providers, but those spaces on campus are just hugely important. And the people that provide them for students. So that is something that I keep in mind, is that having those places on campus, whether it's the library or culinary or somewhere where you can feel like it's a space where you can just go be, is really important. At the same time, we are looking at budget cuts. I don't have an answer on that one right now, but I'm happy to discuss it further with the board.
Yeah, I mean, just one comment, I'll say that, and it's going to come out as a little bit pointed, and I don't mean it particularly that way, but like, you know, the point about librarian, I can make the same argument about Spanish, the elementary Spanish, and I know I've been a proponent of that since day one, but you know, I was in Denmark over the holidays, and you know, these kids are learning English and Danish from day one. They're also taking another language. Like, we are a country, much less a state, that has a population whose language is basically taught doesn't matter. And I think raising our kids with dual immersion would be one of my biggest priorities if we could do it fiscally. But this to me is like I realize it's a Band-Aid on a wound, but so again, it's not, to me, I think we can do this with every position. This is the difficult thing when we're in these budget situations. There's always a good reason for every single one of these positions. And I think it's really hard to say this one is more important than this one, or this one is more important than this one, based on the fact that we're trying to, again, meet the needs of the kids. So just to say that, not, again, I don't mean it in a pointed way, but I'm saying it because it's, you know, when you say that, I agree with you. This is critically important. You know, same with this, what you know, when I think about community high, that also is really difficult for me to come to grips with, frankly. But it's, you know, all of these things is, I would challenge each and every one of us, if we're going to say don't do this, we need to come up with another solution. Because if we don't do it, we're still heading towards the fiscal cliff that Josh presented. And that's what I don't have a good answer on, is what is the alternative that we could do that isn't one of the things that was proposed tonight. And that's really not a fun place to sit in.
Well, the alternative is a parcel tax.
And I will say that I could not be more supportive of. The problem is that won't solve the problem today. That'll solve the problem at best in 2 years from now, right? Because we can't pass it overnight. It would take us a while to get it on the election.
Challenge of the right. I mean, we've got to get that on an agenda, on a right to vote for. I mean, that's, you know, probably what, a 2 year away from now thing, with no guarantee on that, but definitely something for us to keep considering.
Just in terms of the Spanish thing, Spanish and even the mental health therapists were just added. The high school librarian has been there since day one. So there is a difference in my mind in terms of, again, the comprehensiveness of a high school. You know, our graduates are going to Ivy League schools, you know, so yeah, they benefit from early interventions in language, Spanish, you know, not discounting that at all. but there are newer adds into our curriculum. So, and there were the newer ads when we didn't have, the forethought of like, okay, how are you going to pay for it in another year? It was so that makes a difference to me in how I look at, a budget reduction. But I'm just saying that I feel like the librarian has to be off of this list. Find a different way to make up that. I mean, even when the proposal, as I understand it, is you take off a credentialed librarian, but you replace it with
Classified.
yeah. So it's not that much. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's just it's to me, it's not a reasonable savings.
Right. And I will say last year we did this same discussion and we ended up with less of a, again, not that I'm saying we need to accept this wholeheartedly without discussing it, but this is the exact thing we did last year and we came up with a solution that we thought would get us in a better place. And here we are again. Right. And I really appreciated the comment from Ms. Schutz online because that's exactly the way, I felt good last year that, hey, we did what we needed to, but we kept what we needed to. And it's just, I'm so worried. I mean, again, I will say again, like that 3%, like our job is done. We have failed as a board if we get there, and we're not that far from that position.
But part of what we did was 0% raise for 1 year. Okay, that was part of it, and so nobody's talking about that. We're not. I don't see any. We're talking about we got negotiations coming up, but we're not. That's not on the table here.
Well, to be fair, frank, 0% was in the out year projection. So that's where we're starting right now is 0%, frankly. Okay. And anything we add on would go on top of that.
I think just speaking, to the contract, I mean, you recall we did a 3-year contract, right? 0% really, that helped us last year because if we had not done the 0, then we would have had to retroactively go back, right, to, account for that raise. So, I mean, obviously this is all accounting for the fact when we have to go back to the negotiating table for raises with hopefully, again, a year contract. And I don't want to go more into that because that's a negotiating, component. But what we are saying at this point is that we would have to be considering for that first year again, probably another, 0% to at least start with that conversation and then, small increases, on the following 2 years beyond that. But I think I do want to call, to attention to the fact that what we did last year, as I said earlier, it definitely helped. We would be in a much worse situation right now if not right for those savings. I mean, PD was one of them, right? I mean, the savings that we've intentionally been about, reducing in other areas, legal fees, as one component. And, I don't have them all in front of me, but, that may be just something for us to, even remind the board to bring that back to, look what we were able to do last year. But it wasn't enough. And we knew, a component of that last year, we brought some of these positions forward initially, right? And it just wasn't, a way forward, for any of those at that time. So, yeah. I'd just like to speak to just a couple of things that, each of you have raised, just to kind of add a little bit more information. Then I think, Assistant Super Jones, you had some information too. But just to speak a little to the athletics, program, I think, everything that we're proposing with this to bring in it, I think if I were to come up with a theme, we're looking at ways to come up with and produce additional revenue, right? I mean, that's the issue, right? So I think for the athletics program, right now, remind me, what is the amount that we are pulling up to support the athletics program? It's about $150,000. Right. So I think, that was really just an idea. How can we bring, when you create maybe additional revenue to help support that amount? And the 30,000, I think, Josh proposed, there's a potential for that to be even more, right? I think, that is something we've learned from surrounding districts. Many of them do charge. And I hear your point, Trustee Shamas. I mean, we're wanting to encourage more attendance. I mean, one of the ideas, I don't know if we discussed it, was really to sort of have members purchase sort of a card, right? Sort of a membership for the whole year. So you buy that at the beginning beginning of the year, that would get you then into all games, right? So that would do away with the need for people to, constantly utilizing their phones or whatever, form of payment, would maybe help that. But look, it would be, and perhaps even through that, we could even come up with sort of a donation component of people who could afford to, community members, even donate more, right, to really increase that amount. But the whole thinking behind that is really to allow us, right now we're in a position where, we've just had our high school principal come forward and, Mr. Powers with a proposal for adding another sport. And we are in a position we cannot afford that right now. And so we have got interest from students and in a place where we're having to say no. Right. So I think we're wanting to do exactly what you're saying, Trustee Shimon, is add and build more, opportunities for our students because there's a need, that is a desire. We have 30 students currently who want to go ahead and take on that new sport. And, we're going to, unless we can find the revenue to cover that, we're going to have to say no. And that's heartbreaking. That's unacceptable to me as superintendent, right? We have to find, as I'm hearing, a way to move forward with that. And I do not see a way forward until we're able to actually really identify some significant, reductions, not here, there, and pulling away and coming up with small ideas. That's all going to help. But sustainability, in the out years, 3-4 years away, down from today, that's what we've got to be looking at. And so, yes, these are programs that have provided an unbelievable benefit to all of our students, and no one's denying that. But we've got to start with something. And I think to your point, Trustee Dr. Hazen, I think no matter what we propose, if it comes to a person and a program and a service, we're going to have this room filled with others, right? If we, replace one with another, there's going to be an argument to not do away with that program either, because yes, every one of our positions are essential and they provide an unbelievable service for our students. So I think that's, the one point. I think the other, the comment you made, just about staffing and enrollment, particularly at the elementary, site level. I think we have made significant movement towards ensuring that, yes, we are making those decisions to enroll. Our class size, you can see it over the last 3 years, have increased, particularly at the elementary level. We made a significant reduction last year. We're doing another one this year. In the past, yes, I think from my experience and what I've seen is there were decisions made where it was just easier to add another teacher as opposed to, reducing, right? And or keep maybe 3 teachers with class sizes of 14, 15. We really have been moving away from that. I would say definitely in the last, 2 years for sure, we've made some hard decisions there, with the support, of our association as well with that. And, there's still room there for sure, Trustee Shamas, but I feel at this point as we're looking at those numbers that we're, in a good position. But that is remaining at the forefront as we're looking at these. If there was another position we could reduce at this point, we would be doing so. But the numbers don't really support that right now. But I appreciate you, raising and bringing it up, because that's something we've got to continue to look at and not lose sight of each year as we, do hiring. I think that was it for me. And, I think you had something you wanted to add, Assistant Superintendent John, or no, was that?
There's a few things I could add or address, and I kind of yield to the board whether or not it's relevant at this point. I was going to talk about a parcel tax and the time frame associated with that. I think that that's something we should be working on in concurrent with reductions. General election is oftentimes we'll see a parcel tax. Well, that's a few years away, and then the results of the parcel tax. My concerns associated with the parcel tax are like we do have a revenue issue, but I think more than that, we have an expenditure issue with this district, and to patch it with new revenue is crucial, but I don't know if, to be honest, I don't know if we have the time. My concern is by the time that we were to realize, the district were to realize a parcel tax, which we should be pursuing also, we could be in receivership. We're showing almost that, right? That's a concern. We've talked to the city about this already. We actually have talked to the city manager about this. And this is something we're going to have to bring back to the board to pursue. We did just pass, a general obligation bond measure and increased our taxable liability to our voter base already. And yes, it passed like by 74%, but there might be some fatigue there. And that's something we'd have to go out and survey our community first. So there's time associated with that. But I certainly think it's something we should be looking at, because the increased projected revenue tied to change in legislation to Prop 19, we're not realizing it yet. So, and we may not realize it before it's too late. So I think that's very important that we should pursue that. I bring this up in almost every single interim, anytime I present budget, 85%. When I started in this district, we were 87.1% of our total expenditures are tied to people. It makes it very difficult to make substantive reductions in expenditures to our district when you're only working within 15 to 13% remaining. It's very difficult. $51 million, right? Within 13% of that is what we have left. So it's very, very difficult. And, the unfortunate part of the subcommittee's work is to evaluate expenditures in our district. And this was not done lightly. There was a lot of time, thought put into this, bringing this item forward, and many hours spent in this room with that committee, with our unit members in the room with us. So I think that's something to be noted, that I don't know if that's different than what other districts are doing or not, but certainly that collaborative effort, that partnership is crucial when we're bringing forward, tough topics like this. And finally, as it relates to athletics, you got the varsity lacrosse coach sitting here at the table, and I fundraise for my equipment. I fundraise for uniforms. I fundraise for field equipment, and it's tough for us to continue to shoulder that effort. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to continue, and so is every other coach in this district, try to fundraise for our programs. But at the very same time, we have to get to away games. We have to pay league dues. We have to pay for referees. Lacrosse, we have 3 referees at every single game, where we can end up with issues with students. It's an aggressive sport. And those are the things that the district picks up the costs for. And there's growing costs associated with that. There's growing costs associated with expansion of program. I run one varsity team, right, 9 through 12. If we hit 7 more students, we're going to be split with 2. So there's all of that has to be considered. And I mentioned this earlier, beta testing, the revenue side of things for spring gate fees. We're gonna see what the appetite looks like. And Dr. Adamson mentioned this, and I know this district used to have a pass at one point years ago, where it was, I'm just gonna throw this out, $100 a parent pays for, and it gets them into every sport, every home sport. I think you'd see an appetite for that. You really would, right? We have families that have students that are 3-sport athletes. Right, exactly. So it eliminates the need for the gate fee, but it does drive up revenue. So those are all the things I kind of wanted to address, and I appreciate this is not an easy discussion, but I do want to reinforce the fact that a lot of thought and effort went into this collaboratively with our partners.
2 quick things on that. I would love to see that 100 go up to 200, where 100 of it goes to the people that can't afford. So you have an option to say, you have the option to pay more, pay for someone else to have free access, because I think, again, there's creativity that we can do there. But again, that's what's the number, 30,000, right? Was the number I think you gave for that. That's not going to solve the fundamental bottom line issues. The other one, again, coming up with a point of longevity, like sadly in my day-to-day job, I have to make similar decisions a lot with budget, and there may be a need for AI digital literacy, and that's a position we have to hire. And if we hire it today, that doesn't mean it's less important than the position we've had 30 years ago that was teaching us table manners. Sorry if there's a class that comes too close, but you know what I mean? Like, our curriculum has to evolve. And again, I'm not saying that the librarian is in any way like that. I agree the criticality of that, especially in the world we live in. But again, this is the reality of the budget's difficulties we have to face. And so, this is where I come back to that idea of the one-time funds. Are there things we could do to look for what those rising needs are? And we've been bringing up AI, in digital literacy. Are there funds we can bring in that, again, won't allow us to keep a position forever on one-time funds, but they could allow us to keep making sure we're offering those needs with the fiscal reality that we're living in. And I'll just make my point again about the idea of the board policy and norms, maybe just direct that at you. Is that something we could do? I know that's that with the parcel tax. Let me add to that too. I will say right now, I am putting my finger on the scale. This is not the first time I've mentioned my support for the parcel tax. I would like to see if, as the board, we could say, let's make that a reality, that we explore it to the soonest date that we can. Doesn't mean we have to move ahead with it, but I think we need to start not putting that one on the future agenda items and start moving it towards the front.
The parcel tax for sure. And then the norm you said about how we stay in.
Yeah, we're not, as a board, we agree not to spend one-time funds on recurring costs, because if we do, again, that way we know what the norm is, and if we go across it as a new board, we know the difficulty is placing us in.
I think we bring that forward for, a board discussion at a future meeting. And yeah, if we,
We don't solve our problems today, but they're at least hopefully getting us back on a track that is more where we want to be. And that's again, the difficulty of this right now.
I'm writing future agenda items. We want to do parcel tax, right? And we want to do, what you said, board norms, but maybe it's more just policy, right, on how we, spend, right?
I prefer it as board policy, but I don't know always what's allowable.
Yeah, we'll look into
the
that.
policy committee. Yeah.
Well, just as far as I know, this is informational in nature. We've got 2 weeks as we've, going to need to turn around to prepare for our February 5 meeting where we bring forward again. It will be an informational item, but I think what we're seeking from the board this evening is any additional direction. I mean, at this point, the idea would be to really, look more and come back with a little bit more detail in, how how this would look, with moving forward with these positions. Is there any other direction, unless I hear differently from the board, right? I think that's really what we're seeking from all of you tonight, as far as direction for that February 5 meeting.
The one thing that wasn't in here, and we talked about doing this last time, was the legal fees. So, I mean, it's not like we're back to, we'll just call Rosanna whenever we want. So, but I think that needs to again be front and center.
Yep, we'll keep that. And I think, that's, definitely as we bring forward, and I think we brought that forward in October to kind of show, and we can bring that forward again, even to kind of see where we are mid-year, but there's significant savings. And I think that is just a direct result of, number one, it's a couple of things, right? I think we haven't had, and I have to touch word as I say this, but, okay, I won't say it out loud to jinx ourselves, but there have been significant, savings in one particular area where normally those are expenses we would have seen way more by this time of year, and we have not, and those are unavoidable, right? When, I will say, even we've had quite an increase in, CPRAs, so I think that's been a challenge. Yes, tenfold. And in fact, that was something that was spoken about at our recent superintendent's council meeting last week at MCOE, and that was called attention to that every district are being inundated with, basically, uniform complaints, right? Just not uniform, I'm sorry, public workforce requests, right? And that really is, some districts are fortunate. They have one individual at the district office who's dedicated towards just addressing and responding to, because it's an enormous amount of time. It's the gathering of documents that are involved in some of these requests are 10 to 12 different, individual separate items we've got to spend time gathering within, the time frame. So definitely we've been having to rely on legal. We don't have, one person at the district office whose, sole role is that. But I think we've had people who are now 2-3 years into their role. And so, I think the experience has come. We've been leaning a lot more on MCOE and support services they've been able to provide. So that has not been, sort of a regular practice, right? Just picking up the phone unless it's absolutely essential. Yeah. Yeah. So we've definitely seen a significant savings there. Yeah.
I apologize in advance for being a bad board member and that sort of thing. But the legal fees, those are unforeseen. We can't plan for those. As Josh was mentioning, the costs, well, as everyone mentioned, it is detrimental to the experience and the education of doing any cuts, because if a program expands and a kid finds their way, their niche in that particular program, that's great. It's great to offer a breadth of programs. So, we are trying to do things for the greater good. And I'm very aware that someone might find their niche in digital learning and we are possibly deciding to take that away. But the thing that we can control, and again, I haven't spoken to anyone, and I'm sure my house will get TP'd, but I don't see how like we can do this without, or I personally don't see how we can't look at the salary schedules for some sort of reformation, because I would give someone $5 back taking a small reduction than having a wall taken down in my house. You know, like I that's a horrible analogy and it's the head cold, but like that is the thing that we could control for to a certain extent. And we want to provide a good education. We want to pay our teachers well. I think we do. And there are just some very tough challenges, both on the funding side and the education side. And so that just seems like something that I can't not think about in terms of addressing the long-term budget. And again, I would love to look at a partial tax. As mentioned, it'll take years if it passes. But I think the salary schedule is always, or is of interest to me, and holistically, just making our community as a whole more resilient and independent from the whims of state budgets, that sort of thing. You know, we need more affordability to get more taxpayers, to get more families enrolled. It is a multi-tentacled problem, I realize, but I just think we I don't know, my brain fogged up with everything, but I just wanted to throw that out there as somehow something to look at, if our amazing staff are able to.
I'm in agreement. I think this is kind of like phase one, or maybe last year was phase one, and this is, I don't know, forget the phase analogy. But what I'm looking for is like a fiscal stabilization plan or something of that nature that can give us kind of the bigger picture and maybe the longer term picture of what we're trying to start with these reductions. Yeah. Just, I guess I would leave it to staff as what that looks like in future years. But if we are to make cuts and continue on the trajectory and the board direction that we want our deficit reduced, we want to be revenue neutral. Having a plan that we can draw from and work from as a board and a district would be helpful. That way, when we're not necessarily in budget discussion years, we can still know where we're at because our priorities are fiscal stabilization or something of that nature. And again, that doesn't do anything for tonight. So board, I am gonna ask if there are any further comments on the item. I think we've talked about it at length and it still is a difficult discussion. We have the reductions that were proposed and created by staff based on their research and data. The reductions came before the budget committee. The recommendations were made at the budget committee and are now coming before us in the study session. we can give direction to proceed with the recommendations as presented or alternative. So as it's going to be an info item at the next meeting, I would ask that we direct staff to further, I don't know, investigate. What would be the next step, Dr.
I think we would be bringing forward, what we have presented, right, to the February 5th meeting with maybe a little bit more information, right, about, how that would allow us a little bit of time to sort of dig into it a little bit more about, what, in the absence of some of these programs, what we'd be looking at. And then maybe it give us a bit more time for the MHT component with those two options. Any additional information, Assistant Chief John? Yeah.
I think you laid it out perfectly. I mean, I kind of envisioned it at the budget or at the information item. There was 3 2 plus 2.5 hour meetings that occurred with the budget subcommittee, and this is the result of those meetings. I was thinking that at the Feb 5 meeting, we'd kind of go into a little bit more detail on maybe some of the other items that were looked at, maybe, right, that didn't make it forward, other restricted program encroachment, things like that, that did not make it to this level because it wasn't a recommendation to the subcommittee. I mean, I think because we did explore a lot. So I think that would be folded into the presentation that we bring on.
Agreed, yeah. And I think keep in mind, last year we did a significant, we gathered a lot of input from the community at large. I will say as well, both CSCA and PGTA, they submitted exhaustive lists last year. We had asked them to return with anything additional. And, from their point of view, they had really, again, that word, exhausted, all of the ideas and options. And some of the ideas that were on the list last year, didn't even make it. We've added, 1 or 2 of those this year. So, I feel like we're acting on, information and, ideas that have been brought forward already, based on the work that we've done. So, but I like the idea of also bringing forward some of the rationale behind why why did some of those ideas not make it on, and why we can't consider some of them, right? So
I think that's really important to see. And I'll kick the can a little bit on the difficult decision and just say I do also think the long-term planning, though. I mean, the other thing that I remember was presented to me, I think, by Chief Bergman on my first day on the board was the reconfiguration discussion. Again, if we're talking about long-term and declining enrollment, I still do not like that idea, but we need to look at it relative to the other options if we're looking at long-term fiscal solvency. And I don't know how, again, maybe giving a present to a future board member that we have some of these long-term plans so that they're not making these kind of meetings every year, hopefully. Is something that I would feel strongly I would like to do. As for the presentation tonight, I agree with everything mentioned. Like, none of these programs, I don't want to cut any one of them, but I don't see that as being an option. So I think it is important for us to at least have more information from the subcommittee decision before we make a deviation from the recommendations presented.
I have a question. Are we looking at asking the charter school to increase the rent that can maybe possibly pay for a couple of positions?
We bring forward the lease agreement with the charter school. I can tell you that I have conversations with them all the time. They're looking to enter into a longer term lease with us with the 1-year renewals. They're looking at expanding space and use of additional square footage. But I will caution that that's not unrestricted revenue. It's just not. It's
But if we need something to tide us over to a parcel tax.
I hate to say, imagine if they then break the lease, right? Then we've now lost another source of revenue.
Yeah, and not only that, right? So I think there's a bigger picture. Number one, we lose that, but now, look, there's just been a submission to MCOE for a county charter school, right? So the moment you as a district have an open space, that immediately becomes a possibility for a charter option, which is not something we would necessarily.
No, but when was the last? I mean, okay, it's fair. We just put in money to that David Avenue to upgrade.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not unreasonable to increase their fees. I mean, it should be looked at.
We will bring that maybe more information, on that to that February 5th meeting, just so that way they can, everyone sharing the same information for it. We will absolutely look into that a bit more, Trustee Shamas, and bring back what we can. Yep. And I think even looking at would be helpful there, I think for the board, just looking at, the last couple of years, what those fees have been, what increase there has been. And let's see what the potential is there as well, but we can absolutely bring that forward.
A lot of good ideas for future planning. Or do we have a consensus on direction for staff? The recommendations are presented in the packet presentation.
And I'll look to you, Clerk Shamas. I mean, do you want a presentation with certain things left out? Like, do you want that as one of the alternatives that come up in our presentation next week?
Yeah, I would like the librarian and the digital learning specialist out.
Okay, so if we could see that as one of the scenarios, understanding that.
Yep.
I think
Option.
Yeah, one of the options, recognizing that I think, well, I don't know, Trustee Wax, we should hear from you what your opinion is, but it sounds like you, from your earlier comments, that we're on the same overall realization of what we need to do.
There we go.
Just so we can see what the projections look like. And
so what I'm hearing is we would have, this is with all of everything that we've included, and then we'd have another option with those two positions. And if we just went with some and not all, and what that would look like to bring forward for the board to make a decision on, right? Is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Is that right?
so what you're saying, yeah, I mean, I would like to, if it's possible, and I'm staring at your cold addled brain here, Trustee Wax, but about like your view as to how you feel about the alternative versus the proposal as presented by the budget subcommittee. Like, do we want to say our direction is A, but we'd like to see option B, or do we say our direction is we want to see option A and B? I know that's like parsing words a bit, but I think it's important for us as a board. If that's too much, that's fine. We can just.
I mean, I like options. Yeah, to see proposals with A and B would be helpful. And I know things are kind of getting conflated with like longer term planning, but I'll add my voice to also support a reasonable increase in rent I don't want to run them out, but I do think it's, especially with our investments in that campus, I don't think it's unrealistic or bad to consider more than the bare minimum raise. I would also personally, again, like to look at expanding the Pebble Beach territory, or like what would be involved with that to get more of those parcel taxes, or those taxes, again, to really build out a number of options for long-term.
Really quick question or quick answer to what boundary changes would involve. I mean, that seems like a very long process, but
it's a long process that would involve 2 other school districts and 2 other boards.
And everyone would have to agree unanimously on it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We draw new lines.
MPU
and everyone
have to.
And Carmel.
Willing to, right, yeah.
But again, I think that's something we can put on a long-term plan. I'd love to see some strategies on how to sell that, because that's the hard thing, but I agree with you. It's something we should be looking. I mean, I'm a fan of looking at everything we can moving forward.
Okay, board. I think we've got option A and or option B, but an alternative to be explored at our February 5th meeting. With that, our discussion is concluded. I want to thank everybody for their participation and their patience, and for being extremely respectful during the discussion today. And we will now adjourn. Our next regular board meeting is February 5th, 2026.